let's start with Syria and the meeting on Friday. So from the Secretary and Foreign Minister Lavrov's news conference, it's clear that the meeting will indeed take place on Friday. Can you let us know whether you expect it to be one meeting, a series of meetings, whether they're going to be bilats Thursday night or Friday morning, sort of how things are going to unfold?
The agenda for the meetings on Friday is still taking shape, but in general, I think you can expect that this will flow much like meetings have gone in Vienna. So I certainly would expect that the Secretary would take full advantage of the gathering to conduct bilateral discussions as he sees fit, or as some of our partners in the process see fit, if they desire to see the Secretary. So I would expect some bilateral meetings. On the side, I also expect that the bulk of the morning on Friday will be spent in the ISSG format, such as in Vienna, with the same 20 participants that were there. As you know, that's 18 countries, plus the Arab League and the EU as well. So I would expect the same group, same sort of format, again with bilateral discussions as needed, and then there will likely be some meetings at the UN in some format. I think that's all still being worked out with the goal, as I think Foreign Minister Lavrov spoke to, the goal of trying to arrive at a resolution that sort of embodies and codifies the Vienna process so that it's enshrined in a resolution. But that side of the effort, that part of the day is still shaping up. And I think as we get closer to the end of the week, we'll be able to give you more detail.
What is the utility of a Security Council resolution essentially endorsing the Vienna work?
Because it codifies it under UN auspices. I mean, if you look back at the 2012 Geneva communique, that was all done under UN auspices. And it was no accident that at the second meeting of the ISSG, both meetings in Vienna, the UN was represented, but in the second one in particular, UN auspices and a UN-led process was approved and endorsed by everybody that participated. And I think the Secretary as well, and I know other foreign ministers feel the same way, but certainly the Secretary feels like keeping this under UN auspices is the right approach.
Other than getting kind of a UN stamp of approval, can you help us understand what is the utility of these meetings beyond the, keeping the momentum going? I mean, tangibly, other than getting a UN stamp of approval and having another meeting itself, how do you see this actually advancing the process of getting the parties into talks by January 1, as was the goal originally set?
Well, I mean, I think the best way to, the proof's in the pudding, I think, in terms of answering your question. The meeting in Riyadh, which produced results in terms of getting the opposition unified around some core principles. That was an outgrowth of the Vienna discussions. The work that Jordan is doing right now to coordinate a process by which groups that will be held to that process will be further identified. That's an outgrowth of discussions that were had in Vienna. The framework for having the opposition groups sit down with the Assad regime, perhaps as early as, or the target date as early as is early next year. All that was an outgrowth. So when I say build momentum, I'm not just tossing a philosophical phrase out there. There really has been tangible, practical momentum created by these multilateral sessions, at least the two in Vienna, and actually going back to Doha when the germs of some of these ideas were really sort of laid down. So the Secretary believes two things. One, there is a sense of momentum, a sense of urgency that the international community is rallying around and that we need to continue to move forward. But number two, that these meetings are producing actual results. It I guess it's it's easy to look at the communique and say, okay, I've seen a communique, I've seen it, I've seen these before. But when you think about the extraordinary amount of material in these last two communiques, and that you had nations who have hitherto been almost diametrically opposed on certain issues be able to still sign up to some core fundamental principles about moving forward in Syria, that's not insignificant. And that only comes from the hard work of diplomacy, face-to-face, bilaterally, multilaterally, and that can only be achieved when you get people together in the same room.
One last one for me. Do you fully expect, I mean, it's implicit in your saying you expect it to be in the ISSG format of 18+2, but do you fully expect the Iranians to attend?
I don't want to get into specific participation. Each nation should speak for themselves as to whether they're going to come and participate. But it is, as I said in the outset, it's our expectation that this will be held at the same level with the same participants as before. But each nation, I wouldn't speak for their travel plans. They need to talk to that. Okay?
John, can I ask about the Secretary's comments just now out of Moscow?
Sure.
He said that the U.S. and Russia found common ground on Syria. I'm just wondering if any of that common ground is new. Because it sounds like the areas, the things upon which they agree still stand, but I didn't hear any new developments in terms of gaps closing.
I'm really not going to go further than the Secretary did. I think even he was careful not to get ahead of things. So I think I would just leave it at what he said. And obviously I wasn't in the meeting, so I couldn't speak authoritatively to specifics of what they discussed. But I think I would just leave it at what he said, which is that there has been some common ground achieved in these discussions, and that's important for moving forward.
Should we expect announcements or some sort of developments on Friday?
I'm not going to get ahead of Friday or
I
any
ask.
announcements or agenda.
Okay.
It was a fair question, but I'm not going to get ahead of the process.
But could you tell us if you expect to achieve more than what has been achieved in November in Vienna? This comprehensive statement you had on the ceasefire, on the elections, on the constitution.
Well, again, I won't get ahead of a meeting that hasn't happened, Nick. I think we need to let it have the meeting, and then obviously there'll be a chance after the day is over to read that out to the press and to the public, and we'll do that. I simply won't get ahead of what decisions may or may not be reached. It's clear to me from watching the last two meetings in Vienna that these are working meetings. I mean, the ministers at the table are talking about meaningful, tangible things. There are very frank, candid discussions where disagreements still linger, and there's a very concerted effort. I've seen it now twice to come to resolution on some of things, which has led, in both cases, to very specific and I think pragmatic, tangible communiques. I think without previewing any decisions or specifics going forward to Friday, I think you can expect that same level of activity and energy and detail that will be applied when they sit around the table later this week, and that there is now talk and consideration and effort towards a UN resolution. I think that alone speaks for itself in terms of what they're trying to drive at here on Friday.